Hello and welcome to this episode of the Complex Couple Podcast. I am Jennifer, joined by my co-host and husband, Keith. Hey, how's it going today, baby?
It's going great. It's good to see you, even though your face is, well, I shouldn't say anything yet.
What?
We'll get to
What
that in a minute. But it's always good to see my beloved, who keeps me locked up in the cellar like a gimp or something.
That is a lie. As we know, that is a lie.
But I'm doing well, honey.
You're doing well. And you're sporting one of our Complex Couple sweatshirts.
That's right. Make sure you get them.
Oh, my gosh. I have to say, you got to stand up. We can't see the back of it. There we go. There's our logo. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, check out the sweatshirt, our sweatshirts on YouTube. Those are the softest sweatshirts I have ever owned in my entire life. I love them. Yours is blue, mine is black.
Mm-hmm. I've had all kinds of sweatshirts. Actually, I've got that old Marine Corps one.
Yeah.
That is my favorite. I've had it for probably, going on 10 years now. And I thought that was soft when I got it. But this thing, the only way to describe this, and it's going to sound a little weird, if you guys need to know how soft this is, just imagine your partner's softest underwear and magnifying that by 5 times. It's like silk, but it's cotton.
It's
It's unbelievable.
Wasn't sure where you were going with that, but
I wasn't sure either.
Yeah,
but I kept it clean.
I don't know.
Yep.
But actually, this is a nice segue into our topic today, because we are now selling these sweatshirts and t-shirts and tank tops on our website, and 100% of the profit that we get, if any of our followers, listeners want to get a t-shirt or other piece of merchandise, 100% of the profit will be donated to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Today, we are going to talk about homelessness. We were just looking at some statistics and realized that over 500,000 people in the United States are currently homeless. And with the current pandemic, there are some estimates that that number could go up by another 250,000 people. The reason why this topic is near and dear to our hearts is because Keith, at one point in his life, actually had a period of time where he was living on the streets or in homeless shelters, and he's going to talk about that story today. Right, baby?
Yes. Yeah. Lucky me.
Yeah, I know. I know you've been a little nervous about talking or sharing this story, because there is some, there's some emotions surrounding this experience for you.
Yeah. So I don't know how you want to get into it, or do you have questions right off the bat? But
yeah, let's just maybe we could set the stage a little bit. Like, how old were you? What were the circumstances that led to this situation for you? Let's just start there. Those are big questions.
This was something I was actually thinking about on and off for the last week. And because it's, it's not an easy thing to talk about, but it can happen to anyone. And I learned that especially the hard way, because it happened to me. So going back to probably, I guess I was about 30 years old, maybe a little bit over 30. And I found myself in a situation that I put myself in where I had nowhere to go. And it wasn't the first time that I felt that, shitty feeling of like, oh man, I'm on my own. And I guess the first time was probably when I got kicked out of my house. When I was probably, I don't know, I could have been 14 or 15. I would get randomly kicked out for an infraction of some kind. And sometimes I would find myself wandering the streets. And then other times I felt homeless because home wasn't a home. You know, it was just a place for me to go to, but I wasn't really, I don't want to say I was accepted, but it just like, it was so fragile there that I could be out at any second. So I was like that nervous cat, you know. But getting back to this situation, so I was married. I had a couple of kids. My marriage deteriorated, and I had nowhere to go. And I ended up going up to New Hampshire in the wintertime.
So you left. You had a home with your wife and kids.
Yep.
And you didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah, basically that's what it was. It was, you know, it had become a situation where, you know, Kimmy didn't want me there. I wasn't serving any purpose. You know, my kids were young and I was very unhappy. She was unhappy. And I just left. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I always figured I would, you know, I'd find a place, find a way. So I end up in New Hampshire in the wintertime. And the day I got there, I mean, I had minimal money and I end up taking a train to Boston. And I think I took a train into Methuen and then Haverhill or whatever. And I get off the train and I kind of take it from there, but I hadn't eaten in a couple of days and I was really hungry. I don't know why, but I just felt like I needed to eat.
I don't know why. I hadn't eaten in a couple of days. I don't know why I was hungry.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to comprehend, but I was hungry.
I mean, it sounds
and it sucked.
Like you had,
you know,
reason to be hungry is what I mean.
Yeah. So, anyways,
can I back up just a second? So the reason, I mean, lots of people get divorced, right? But not lots of people end up homeless. So is there a little bit more to that story? Was there?
Yes, there's more to that story, of course. So, and I'm kind of getting into it, but after my marriage had kind of failed and I had moved out, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had a friend of mine who was open to, you know, possibly helping me at some level. So I started hanging out with this person. And getting back to the story, now I'm in a homeless situation. I have nowhere to go. I don't have a car. I don't have any major money. You know, I mean, there's nothing substantial that I have. So I don't have any real means of putting a deposit on anything or paying for rent, first and last. So I end up in this small town and I only know one person and I make contact with them. And this is where it kind of gets weird. So I ended up going to the library and with this person. And while we were in the library, I was reading a book. And I've really had no intention on, what's the word I want, being disrespectful to any homeless people. I've always kind of felt bad for them. But I was sitting down at a table and I heard a commotion at the front door of the library.
So this is before you're homeless, right? This is when you're still living at home, right?
Yes.
I just want to set the context. I've heard this story before and I want to make sure people understand. Okay.
So I was looking at what was going on and this librarian was telling this homeless man that he could not come into the library with his push cart. He had like a garbage shopping cart that he had his belongings in, and it escalated. And he was saying things like, you know, I was a taxpayer. I don't have a job now, but I helped build this library. And it was raining outside. It was cold. And the librarian was like, if you bring this in, I'm gonna have to call the police. And I remember listening to it for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then I looked down at the book I was reading and I made a comment like, you know, this guy was concerned that someone would steal his belongings out of the cart. That's why he wanted to bring the cart in the library. And, you know, I just had that moment where I said something stupid to myself. And I said, come on, dude, man, just put your cart outside. Who's going to steal your shit? You got nothing. That's exactly what I said. Didn't think twice about it. And, you know, they argued some more and eventually he left and it was really cold. It was like freezing rain, a mix. And I never thought about it again. Fast forward to, you know, a couple of months, whatever it was. And I end up back into this town again, and I'm alone. And it's the first time I've ever had to beg for food or ask for someone to feed me, right? Like specifically, not like walking by someone and they offer you something. I actually was actively seeking food. So,
and how did you do that?
Well, at first I didn't know what to do because I'd never been in this situation. So it's kind of like I'm in this small town. I know one person, and I end up kind of walking around. And as the time went on, that thirst to eat, that desire to have food was overwhelming. I was so hungry. And I ended up asking someone if there was a homeless shelter or some type of shelter where I might be able to get some food. And this guy told me, if you go up the street, take a right, there's a house there on the left. It's a woman's shelter. They may have some food there. And it was right around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I walked up the road and I got to the place, and it looked like a big house, but it was basically a battered woman's shelter, and no men allowed. But I didn't really understand the concept of that, that these women that were in there with their children were suffering from PTSD. Some had probably, police protection from domestic. Who knows what was going on there? But I didn't think much about it. And I knocked on the door, and this lady she kind of cracked open the door. She was part of staff. And she says, "Oh,
she was a part
can I
of
help
what?
you?" She was staff there.
Staff. Okay.
She worked there, right? So she says, "Could I help you?" Very quietly, And I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I said, you wouldn't happen to have any extra food that I could have. I'm kind of homeless and I don't have any food. And this is very embarrassing for me because I'm young, I'm fit. I was in the service, different branches. I've done a lot of traveling. I shouldn't be in this situation, but here I am. I've made some bad choices. I was right around 30 years old, okay. 30, 32. And it's embarrassing. It's just like you don't even want to look at yourself in the mirror, So
at this point, you were no longer in the military. So you had no paycheck coming in.
Yeah, there was no money coming in. And I wasn't even like dealing with the VA or trying to get benefits. I had broken away from everything. And I was in a really bad place as far as my mental state. I was dealing with PTSD, depression, separation from my wife, missing my kids. It was all shit. It was really a tough time. So this woman is standing there and she asks me, what I need. And I tell her, and she says, "Yes, we can help you, but you can't be here. There's an alleyway next to the building to your right. And I'm going to open up the window. I'll put a plate of food with you. And then when you see the window open up, I'll hand it to you, but you have to go somewhere else to eat it because this is a battered woman's shelter and we can't have men around." And I was, totally thankful, like so much. And she made me this big pile of food. Wow. So, I received the food from her and I thanked her, and I just took it. And when you're in the situation, you're not thinking about what you're going to eat tomorrow. You're not, it's kind of like when you look at a car and you go, "Oh, I can't wait to get the next car." Everything is just a necessity. Where do I need to pee? Where can I go to get warm? Where can I get a cup of coffee? Whatever. It's minimal. It's so minimal. And I took the food and I gobbled it up. So now, I'm walking around, I've eaten, I feel better. My brain's working right. And I'm like, I have no place to stay. I mean, it's freezing cold. Now it's snowing. And, this is wintertime.
Where's your one friend who you know?
They were kind of gone. They had left and they really weren't around. Like, that's a whole different story. But,
okay.
Anyways, they weren't around.
So it's not like they knew you were coming and you could crash.
No, they had no idea.
Got it. Okay.
And I was embarrassed. I wouldn't even ask for that. I figured I'm going to figure out a way to make it there. Whatever. I was on just running on E. So I walked around the small town. It's getting really, really cold. And I asked someone, "Is there a shelter for homeless people?" And the response was yes. But you can't go in until 6 o'clock. And of course, it's wintertime, so it's getting dark. Freezing cold. It's just getting colder. So I go up to the address where this homeless shelter is at, And there were people lined up with their belongings, backpacks, Well, they all look different. Some old, some young, a few females, drug addicts, alcoholics, you name it. And they're all lined up. And I got this very uncomfortable feeling like, I'm not sure if I want to stay there. I needed to think. And the one thing I did have plenty of time was time. So I decided I'm not going in. So I turn around and I start walking. And I walked from like 6 to like 11 o'clock at night in a snowstorm. I couldn't stop because I felt like I was going to freeze to death. So I'm just walking and I'm hating on myself. And I'm trying to wonder, like, how did this, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? And now I'm so cold, it's getting close to midnight. And they had told me that after midnight, you can't get in. So around 11 o'clock, I made my way up there, cold, wet, and I got in. And, you got to sign in and this and that. And I was able to take a quick shower. They had towels to warm up. And I looked for a bed. And, this kind of situation is not very comfortable because you do have people in there that have mental issues, drug addicts. They're on drugs when they go in there. They're drunk. They can be hostile. The staff is limited. So if something happens, you have to be prepared to take care of yourself a little bit.
So and what is the environment like? Like, are there a ton of beds in one big room? Are there bunks? Are there different rooms? Like, I don't know.
No, I mean, in this setup, there was a couple of rooms. Each room had like one shower and a few toilets, but then there was bunk beds and they were in different angles lined up. It kind of looked like a military berthing area almost. It wasn't super big. There was some snacks on a table and there was, these people, they know each other, if you're homeless in the area. So you had some people playing cards or talking or, just some people are they don't want to talk to anyone. They're scared of people. So they're all in there. I come out of the shower. I've got my backpack and my stuff and I'm looking for a rack and I see one and I just go to it and I throw my stuff on the top because no one's sleeping on it. And I don't know who's sleeping below it. But all of a sudden, this guy comes over and it turned out to be the same guy that was at the library. And I kind of looked at him and I recognized him immediately. And then when he said hello, I recognized his voice. And with that being said.
And in that moment, before you keep going, like, how did you feel? I mean, because you felt about him one way in the library, right? You're like, hey, dude.
I felt like an asshole.
Did you?
I did. I felt, God, I was hating on myself big time. I just, it was rough because you're embarrassed because you shouldn't be there, not because you're better than them, but because you had more choices. You had a lot of those people have no choices. They don't have a chance. There's no options for them. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, homeless people suck because they're lazy, I'm going to be honest with you. You don't know what you're talking about. Many of them have mental problems and they don't have any kind of health care or coverage. They don't eat right. They're just really broken and they'll never be right. But I sat there and I said, well, I used to do all these things and, I was productive and I had a lot of training. I should have been, I shouldn't have been there because I expected more of myself. But that goes along the lines of saying, don't ever think that it can't happen to you because it can.
Yeah, and you were not in a good mental state at this time in your life.
I wasn't.
So making good decisions didn't come easily, I suspect.
No, I was struggling in the civilian world after coming home, and I didn't like it, and I was
the civilian world. You didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't like it, and I still wanted my wife back, believe it or not, even though it was as bad. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going back. I'm getting my family back. I just don't know how I'm going to do it because I didn't want to lose my wife and my kids. It was
devastating. But you weren't easy to live with at that time.
No.
For her, it wasn't easy to live with you.
No. Yeah. But that's hard to see,
Yeah.
when you're dealing with someone was dealing with the things I was dealing with, and
because you had a lot of PTSD from your service.
Yeah, I mean, I had that kind of childhood that didn't help out, and I did have PTSD, but
childhood being filled with neglect and no support.
Just shit,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
just trying to lay the land for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're throwing that stuff in there, because otherwise it could be hard to follow. But basically, this guy and we became pretty good friends. And I'm not going to mention his name, but I said to him one time, I said, "Hey," I said, "how'd you get here?" And I was sitting on the bunk, and he was like in his 60s. And he just kind of looked at me and laughed and said, "Keith, I think the more important question is, how'd you end up here?" Right? And I said, "You got me on that one." But we ended up becoming, I would consider, good friends. And I learned a lot from him about living on the street. He kind of felt, a lot of them feel like that's just their life they're going to live, and they don't want anything else. Either, they're fed up with society, or they don't want to be ruled or governed. They don't want to pay taxes. It's kind of like they were born, their life sucked. They don't even want to be here. They're just kind of stuck. They can't kill themselves, so they drink themselves to death, or they drug themselves to death eventually, or whatever. They just can't, they're not going to get out of it, And some of them like being off the grid. They don't want to be domesticated
like the rest of us.
No. Those are the ones you're not gonna put them in a corral. They're not being herded. They walk where they're gonna go, and they're very resilient.
So there's a lot of freedom in that for them.
It is.
I'm guessing.
It is. But it's hard. It depends what kind of person you are too. For me, I wanted to do more, so I was thinking about, should I go back in the service? But I knew if I went back in the service, I would never get back with my wife, because she was adamantly against it, So I struggled with all kinds of thoughts. But, I got into a routine in this shelter. So my friend would go in. What was your routine?
Can you kind of walk us through a typical day?
Okay, well, I got up. We had to be out of there by like 6:30 in the morning. So you got to picture this. It's, really, really cold outside. There's snow all over the ground. You don't have a job. You don't have any money. So it's kind of like you get fed once a day in this park around 4:00. So you go the whole day pretty much without eating anything. So what I would try to do is get up, get a quick shower in, because it made me feel good. And then I would walk around and look for a job. I would go to the unemployment office. This happened pretty fast. So, and the thing was, even though if I got a job, I still couldn't afford to get an apartment. So I was still going to be working and living in a homeless shelter. And I'm not the only one that was doing that. There's many people doing that, including women. We had a few women in there. But I kind of started to formulate a plan. And I said, okay, I really need to be resilient and disciplined on how I start living my life. So what I did was I would get up and I would spend hours at unemployment office on the computers looking for a job. And then I would physically go to businesses just randomly, ask them to do anything, take out the trash, wash dishes, whatever I could do. And I would never go into the homeless shelter until after 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Never.
Oh, no kidding.
It was just.
But would you get your 4:00 meal?
I would get my 4:00 meal.
Then leave again.
And I would walk around. Sometimes I might go into a little business. I had nice clothes. I didn't look like a bum. I had very short haircut. And I walked and moved in such a way that, I just didn't look like I was a typical homeless guy, So, and I didn't have to shave. I had no hair on my face, really. So, I didn't look like I hadn't shaved or whatever. But as time went on,
were there always beds in this homeless shelter? when you could
Pretty
come
much.
back at 10
Yeah.
o'clock?
I mean, there wasn't a ton of us in this little town that were homeless. So I never had a problem getting to bed ever.
Okay.
So, and almost, I will be honest, I almost slept in the same bed all the time. It was like once you were there for a while, everyone kind of knew this is where I sleep. You know, my friend took his bed or whatever. And it just became this routine. But, you know, you have those moments. For me, I had family and I had friends, and it was hard because, I mean, I had absolutely no money, nothing. So I remember one day I was getting really fed up. I couldn't find a job, and there was one payphone that was way down the canal, and I decided I was going to walk to it and call my parents and just ask them if they could send me anything. And it was a long walk. It was probably 2 or 3 miles, in bad weather. And I'm walking, along the canal, and I'm thinking, what am I going to say? Because my parents weren't really giving people, I mean, they just.
Did they have any idea where you were?
No, they didn't. No, they didn't really know. I hadn't shared it with them. I was embarrassed. No one knew where I was at. I mean, I just left Rhode Island. I had my brother drop me off at the train station, and I just disappeared. So now I'm walking to the phone, and I was thinking, is there anybody else I could call? And I have really good friends. My friends, they couldn't believe I was homeless. They would have gave me money, but I couldn't.
You mean after the fact? After
Oh yeah, I still
you weren't
got people
homeless anymore, and they found out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they were like, they couldn't believe it. I just had this conversation with Eric, my buddy Eric, 3 weeks ago. He never knew I was homeless. He's like, I would have gave you whatever you needed to get on your feet. But I felt that it was my own fault. So there was a lot of heaviness with it because I felt I was responsible for my own demise.
Did you have a lot of shame?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard to share where you're at with people because of that. It's way too vulnerable.
Yeah, I just felt like I let everyone down. I let my family down. I let my parents down. I was embarrassed. I mean, I tend to be an ass kicker, go out there and get it done. And I found myself, I hate to say it like this, but what the fuck happened to me? Who am I? And why am I so depressed? And what's going on? So, continue on with the story. I ended up walking to the phone. I saw the phone, and I got 3 feet away from it, and I stopped. And I just looked at it, and I said, you know what? I got myself into this. I'll figure a way out. And I turned around, and I walked back.
No kidding. You didn't call?
I didn't call anyone. So with that being said, went back to grinding my feet, trying to find a job. And I was learning more in the homeless shelter. I realized that these people are, not only are they in need of all the basics, they're lonely. To talk to people that they trust, they always feel like they're being judged, and
because they are.
They are being judged.
They are.
And they're sick. A lot of them are mentally sick. They're on drugs. They don't eat right. They have bad teeth. They haven't been to a dentist. They haven't had a physical. They don't eat enough food. And they're in the elements. If you're not a tough person and you're outside in bad weather all the time, the common cold can kill you. But I started to make friends, and I was kind of goofy in there a little bit because I saw all this despair around me, and I'm thinking, I'll go join the French Foreign Legion before I let my ship sink. And I meant it. So I knew, like, at the end, no matter what happens, I'm going to be somewhere doing something. I just don't know what that is yet, but I'm going to keep swimming. Let's just say that against the current.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting a job. Is there any other questions you want to go with before that?
I do want you to tell us how long you were homeless, either now or after your next story.
Yeah. So I knew that any job that I could get real fast would not provide me with enough money to get out of the homeless shelter. So I had already accepted that I'm going to be here for a while because I don't have a car. I don't have a bicycle. I'm eating 1 meal a day. So I saw on the computer at the unemployment office this, basically it was a sound business for car stereos that they did detailing. And I walked in, I was kind of cleaned up best I could, and I applied for the job. And it was kind of strange because he said, typically we don't hire a guy your age to do this kind of work. We want like a young 18 and 19-year-old guy. And I kind of explained my situation. And the owner and the manager, they could see that, we're gonna give you a chance, And I was very grateful because, I don't know, I might have got $10 an hour. I didn't care. I didn't care. It was $5 an hour. It gave me something to do to make me feel good about myself. And it gave me enough money to where I might be able to have 2 meals a day. And I mean, if you've never done this before, it's not easy, I mean, it's just being hungry sucks. So I feel bad for anyone that struggles to get food on the table. But I ended up working for them, and I worked really hard. I didn't have anywhere to go, so I would stay late. I sweep the floor, empty the trash, clean cars. And eventually I started picking up cars. They trusted my work, and, I was able to do other things. So it made it more interesting. I had more interactions with, what I would consider more normal people in society versus just talking to people in the homeless shelter. And I think it was about 6 months. I worked for him for 6 months, and I saved enough money to move out of the homeless shelter and move across the street into the YMCA in a little teeny room. I'm moving up in the world. Plus, living in the room, I could use the gym. So there was a gym, basketball court. Yeah. So I'm like, man, now I can work out.
Still had showers.
I got my little bed. I bought a bunch of art supplies, so I used to draw at night, And once in a while, I would treat myself and buy myself a Colt 45 beer thing. And I'd sneak it into the YMCA because you're not supposed to be drinking in there, but I throw it in my pack. I knew the woman that worked the desk. She was cool. And I would color and, sketch in my pads, read a book, and get a little buzz on. And I kept working hard. And I was in the homeless shelter for about maybe a month and a half before I was able to buy this shitbox car. I didn't care. It was wheels.
Wait, do you mean the YMCA for a month and a half? Okay, so you were in the homeless shelter for 6 months, the Y for a month and a half?
About a month and a half, maybe 2 months. It's hard to remember. But anyways, I ended up getting a car. But what really, made my life better was I continued to go to unemployment, even though I was working this job, looking for a better paying job. I was always trying to move ahead. So I saw a listing for basically a truck driver that had a CDL. And I did have a CDL license, a Class A.
Can you say what that is in case people don't know?
Yeah, it's a commercial driver's license, so I can drive any kind of truck. I had been to school. I could drive any kind of truck, tankers, doubles, triples, flatbeds, reefer units, regular trailers. And this listing was for a fence company. Actually, I'm going to say the name because they really saved my life. It was DeLuca Fence Company. It was family owned, probably for 4 or 5 decades. Phenomenal company. Hard work, but good people, family owned. So what happened was I saw the listing, and I ended up contacted them, and their application person said, listen, we're going to call you back and figure out something, in which they got in contact with me, and they made an appointment for me to meet this guy that hires people at the 99 restaurant, which unfortunately for me was all the way out by 95. And he wanted to meet me at 1 o'clock for lunch. So I'm trying to play it off like I've got a car, I've got my shit together. He doesn't know I'm in the YMCA. I don't have a car. Plus I'm working. So I told my current boss at where I was cleaning cars exactly what I was doing. And he understood because he knew that, this guy's got kids, he's getting divorced, nice. He's going to pay child support. So it's like, do whatever you got to do. So now I ended up going to this appointment. I had to walk/jog. And I got in there, and as soon as I walked up to the table, we kind of had an idea of what we looked like. He asked me to sit down, and I sat down. I was sweating because I kind of ran and walked. I was trying to get there as quickly as I could. And he looked at me and he says, right off, this is what he says. We introduce each other. He goes, I'm not sure this is going to work out. And I'm like, what the frig?
Before you even had a conversation?
Well, I had a conversation.
Wow.
And I said, he goes, yeah. He goes, I tend to hire guys, really, really big guys, like 6 foot and above. This work is labor intensive. And what are you, like 170 pounds? And not only was I shocked, I got so angry that I wanted to rip the table off the deck and throw it. But I looked at him and I said, please don't judge me by my size. And I actually brought my paperwork, military papers, some other stuff, and I had it on the table, and we started talking. And then I can't remember everything was said, but I had my spiel to tell him when he said that. And he looked at me and goes, you know what? I'm willing to give you a shot. And
that's awesome.
So I went from making like $8 an hour to a union job making almost $30 an hour.
Wow.
And, yeah. I think it was like 27 or something like that. And I worked my ass off. I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day. I worked out for an hour at the gym. Before I got my car, I didn't get my car until after I got that job. I would get on a bus and take a bus to Duluth Defense Company in Methuen, Massachusetts. And I would have time to kill. So I would prep equipment, start making sure all the power tools, gasoline power tools, had fuel in them. And I would stay after work, like almost every day, help other people do other things when I wasn't getting paid for it. And I kind of built that reputation. And I was good at my job. I was creative. We used to do this heavy construction and, these systems on the highway, breakaway systems where it deals with cars hitting, at certain angles. And I like digging or drilling through cement, and I was good with my hands. And, I worked hard. And my boss, my supervisor, his name was Keith. And we just kind of hit it off. So I was able to start saving some money. I bought this shitbox car. And then, I would work, from 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe 3 days a week. I would drive to Rhode Island. So I would work all day and then get off work at 2:30, 3 o'clock, drive 2 hours to Rhode Island, see my ex-wife, my children, stay with them until 1 or 2, and then drive back right to the job, sit in my car, and then go right to work. And I did that for a long, long time. And unfortunately, because I was so busy and working so hard, I kind of lost touch or base with some of the homeless people that I had been living with for a while. And not my proudest moment, but when you go through an event like that, it puts life really into perspective.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So we fast forward now to what was that? Almost 25 years ago. And here I am. I'm married. My ex-wife and I are still talking. My kids are alive. They're okay. I'm still healthy. I got a beautiful relationship with my spouse, and I'm not going to forget about that homeless shelter. I can tell you that. I'm glad I wore my sunglasses because
I know I'm getting teared up in this episode. I am so proud to know you, and you have taught me so much about the homeless population, because I will admit that probably up until I knew you, they were an invisible population to me. They really were. And I think as I've gotten older and more mature, I realized that there are so many different circumstances that create the potential for homelessness. It's mental health and home life and, just countless ways. The younger version of me, used to really, I really believed that it was their own fault, and that why don't they just go get a job? There's lots of jobs available. Just go apply. And I didn't have a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
And so between getting older and wiser and knowing you and hearing your story and watching you interact with homeless people on the street, it's been very eye-opening for me. You're very kind. I'm gonna cry.
It's okay.
You give them money out of your pocket with no expectation on what they do with it. You give away your gloves. You give away your hats. Ask people what they need.
Yeah.
It's really been very touching for me. Yeah. So that is why we are choosing to donate the profits from our merchandise to the to end homelessness, to help fight end homelessness. Probably won't ever end, but at least if we can get people what they need, maybe that's another way to put it.
Yeah.
Then we hope you will visit our website, thecomplexcouple.com, check out our merchandise, grab a t-shirt, grab a sweatshirt, and make a contribution.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I mean, the sad part is that, you know, we tend to do things with expectation. And my counselor, who I absolutely love, has always told me, give more, expect less.
Yeah.
And one of the things I didn't know until I was homeless is the fact that when you see someone's homeless and you give them $5 or $6, don't have an expectation that anything great is going to become of it that you consider great, because they might be just looking to get a six-pack or to get high or to get something warm in their stomachs. So
but it makes their day. It gives
does.
them a bright spot in a dark place.
When I was telling Jennifer the other day, I went to a store and I walked into the store. I was going to buy myself a blueberry coffee. A guy was in there. I didn't know him from a hole in the wall. Well, he's walking in front of me, and I kind of stopped to do something, and I went up to pay for my coffee, and she said, that guy just left you, he paid for your coffee. I was thrilled. I mean, I had money to buy my own, but imagine when you do that for someone who doesn't have a pot to piss in, without being judgmental. Because you got to remember, you could say, well, he got himself in that position of poverty. But you could also say the same thing for a rich guy. There's a lot of wealthy, successful people there that got there because they didn't earn it. Somebody gave it to them. You know? So it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And that's not everyone gets that same break, especially if you've grown up in a deprived family, you've been abused, you don't trust anyone, you've never had counseling. You know, it's very easy to be, these invisible people. There's a website on YouTube if you want to see someone doing a lot of work, and it's called Invisible People. Excellent. We put a link in that in YouTube. So we can link that. Thanks for listening to my story.
So just to explain that a little bit, this is a YouTube channel of a guy. I don't know his name. Do you know his name? While you're thinking about it, he goes and he interviews people on the street and asks them to tell their story. Is that right?
Yes. And once you hear a lot of these stories, it'll kind of open your eyes to life's just not fair all the time.
Yeah. So he's making this invisible population visible.
Yes, he is. All over the United States.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
He has about 500,000 subscribers, and he has over 1,000 videos.
And one more time, what's it called?
It's called Invisible People. You can find it on YouTube.
I love it.
It's great stories. I mean, it's just, and it's raw, it's uncut, but the way the format is just excellent. I actually love it. You would think that I would remember the interviewer's name, but I don't.
That's okay. People will post a link in the show notes, and people can Google it or check out the YouTube channel. Anything else you'd like to add to this episode?
No, that's it. I want to have a beer and move on with my day.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, letting people know that it can happen to anybody. And I'm glad you found your way out. Mm-hmm. One thing I forgot to mention at the top of the episode is that we had a 3-week break because I banged my head really, really hard. And I couldn't really think clearly. And I've been resting on the couch and finally feel like I'm bouncing back. So that shouldn't happen again, all things considered. And our plans change day by day. We know our house is being sold August 14th. And from there where we go, we don't know.
Big question mark.
Sometimes it's Florida, sometimes it's Arizona, sometimes it's in a van, sometimes it's in an RV. So stay tuned. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We'll keep you posted, and we will be back next week. Love you, babe. Thank you.
I love you too. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye, honey.